Hello there, how we doing? Today we are touching on really kind of our final piece of content for this project. And that is going to be the way that line and shape impacts the way we communicate visually. Now you remember probably way back in the beginning of the year, or maybe you don't, I don't know, when we looked at these two shapes, these two sets of lines. And people were able to easily identify which one represented sadness, the one on the right with the drippy quality, and which one felt angrier. And that was all just kind of based on our intuition. But what is really happening there when we look at images like this? Why do we feel those feelings? Well, first let's talk about lines. Lines are the foundation of much of art. They're incredibly versatile, they can create shapes, they can establish patterns, and they allow for the appearance of movement and create a large range of emotions. So lines are really, really useful. In fact, you really can't draw without some form of line. So we might as well be conscientious of how we use them. So they, again, give the image form, they give it shape. They actually create the image. But they also contribute to mood and feeling and create a sense of movement or stillness, which can translate to the vibe of the piece. Different lines, however, have different effects on the viewers. So thick lines can suggest strength or force, or in this case, those thick lines around our image create a sense of intensity. Those bold lines feel very strong. On the other hand, thin lines can create a sense of delicacy, something a little more subtle, or make it feel ethereal, make it feel perhaps a little bit more, not necessarily weak, but almost fragile. Curvy lines are interesting in that they, when used correctly, can have a calming, comfortable effect. However, if you have a ton of curvy lines all over the place, it can create more of a sense of confusion. And then jagged lines are going to communicate turmoil and discomfort and kind of a sense of anger or confusion. Just look at that. Looking at that makes me feel like I'm going crazy right now. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Geometric or mechanical lines. All right, those are what we call lines that are very, very precise and angled and straight, can create a sense of rigidity or control. So even though we have this wacky image on the right-hand side, all of those geometric or mechanical lines still make it feel somehow very rigid, very orderly, almost maddeningly so. Now, some words to describe lines in your art, because remember, you're going to need to describe these lines as you're using them in your reflection, in your rationale. Words like flowing, delicate, simple, bold, thick, thin, fine, vertical, controlled, jagged, ornate, frenzied, fuzzy, broken, playful, expressive, or meandering. Next, we're going to talk about shapes. Shapes are two-dimensional areas with a defined boundary made from lines usually, but also it can be colors, textures, or other shapes. Now we break shapes up into two types. Geometric shapes, those have hard, defined edges like squares, circles, and triangles, or more organic shapes. The kind of shapes that you see in nature. So they're natural, they're flowing, they're often asymmetrical. If you're looking at shapes in nature like plants and things like that, you're going to see organic shapes. But what do? Just like lines, they organize information through connection and separation, and they can symbolize different ideas and create movement or depth. Again, just like everything else, when used well, they can create mood, they can create emotion and vibe. They also emphasize and create entry points and areas of interest, because remember, we have convergence for focal points, so shapes can be used to create convergence, and they will lead the eye from one design element to the next. But how do we interpret different shapes? So Triangles are going to direct movement, okay? They're going to really guide our eyes, and they create a sense of stability or instability and have energy and power, but they can also suggest strength or conflict. Circles are generally perceived as grateful, and they often represent ideas like the eternal. They represent safety. They represent protection. Generally, we regard circles as warm and comforting, and they can represent love even. Sometimes, however, they might indicate confinement, like the idea of being trapped within a circle. And then squares and rectangles. These are strong and stable, and they suggest honesty or security. However, okay, you've always heard that idea of like being put in a box. They connect to that idea as well because they can create a feeling of conformity or rigidity. Some great words to describe shapes here: sharp, detailed, geometric, exaggerated, tapered, sharp, curly, bulbous, chunky, coned, elongated. Great stuff. All right, crew. So now you're going to move into your activity where you're going to look at some line and shape. Do your thing. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow.